If time management worked, you would already be free. But the truth is, your calendar is not your problem, your standards are. So let's jump right into today's episode and understand why you don't need more time management. You need to manage your standards better. And with something we're calling standard boxing, Arash, what is standard boxing?
That's a funny word,
It
right?
is a funny term.
Let me simplify it. Time doesn't create performance, standards do. Most people are operating based on time. And I want to give everyone the advice that I got from my mentor years ago. He said, time can't be managed. Everyone has the same amount of time in a day. Only your activities can. What is an activity? It becomes a standard. And our activities or our actions are the foundation of every result in our life. But we want to make our actions be inspired. What does that mean? That means I'm doing whatever it takes that my goal demands. I'm taking all those actions. And when you make whatever it takes a part of your standards, your results are going to absolutely take off.
For me, and I can be a very type A personality, whenever I think about time management or even hear that term time management, I think about just like gripping my fists, like trying to force whatever I want to happen exactly how I want it to happen. And years ago, I read Touching Lightly, right? And it has changed my entire life about doing things, like you just said, inspired. And you talk about keeping things loose, not being so rigid, being inspired, coming from your future self. And I think that's so important in this specific topic.
Yeah, most people, everyone can relate to this, where at one point in your life you thought, because I was busy, I was productive. Busy doesn't equal productive. Standard equals productive. So a lot of people are working a lot of hours, but they're very distracted hours, and they're not moving on their top 20% of activities that really move the needle. So at the end of every month, at the end of every quarter, they just create based on what they've always created. Mm-hmm. But when you start installing, and I'm not just talking about just average standards, I'm talking about kick-ass standards. Yeah. I want 2026 to be the single best year of everyone's life. And if that's going to happen, that's going to demand us to raise our standards significantly. We can't just tiptoe towards them. We can't just say I have standards. I want you to prove to yourself that you have standards by the evidence each day of that standard. Like, I look at everything based on evidence. The evidence is going to tell me if I'm changing my identity. The evidence is going to tell me if I'm working on my top 20% of activity. The evidence is going to tell me that I'm acting fearless. The evidence is going to tell me that I'm bold. And that's when you're going to take 6 months of results in 30 days. Mm-hmm. And I want you guys to think, can I do that? Test me on that. Test me for the next 30 days that you're going to make every decision from the person who's already achieved it. But every day. And you're going to really look for evidence that you installed and were in harmony with the standard that your goal demands. And you watch how fast you're going to collapse time.
Is standard something that you purposely, consciously work on every single day? And if so, how are you installing that every day?
Yeah, in the beginning, like anything, you have to be intentional. Like, you can't reprogram a new behavior. You can't reprogram a new mindset without intention. But you don't want to pick 500 standards. You want to pick one standard for the next 30 days that are really going to move the needle. And then you have to bulletproof yourself every day when you wake up. You are going to wake up with that standard. You're going to wake up, this is the standard of how I'm going to operate today. And you have to remind yourself to do it. And when you go back to the old standard, when you forget about it, you course correct. The faster you course correct, the faster you're going to explode your results.
Can you give some examples of standards?
A standard is what you normalize, what you automatically do. So an example, let's say somebody wants to dramatically increase their results over the next 30 days, using my example. Mm-hmm. But they tend to procrastinate. Mm-hmm. So what's the opposite of procrastination? Doing things right away. So you make doing it right away a standard. What about another example? Somebody that is wanting to wait until they're ready. Well, that's a losing formula. So you do things before you're ready. That would become a standard. Asking for help. Asking somebody who's already performing the results, say, I just want to observe you. I want to watch you. And then you watch them and you study them so closely, and then you start becoming their behaviors that you want to model. That can become a standard.
Arash, we work with thousands of people all around the world, all different backgrounds, different countries, high achievers, entrepreneurs. What would you say are a few common standards that separate those creating the far best results as opposed to those who are just doing okay or doing a little bit better each year, gradually improving?
Number one, it's being fearless, not worrying about the outcome. Number two is action, action, action. Number three is obsessed about getting better. See, why are standards so important? Why do standards always win? Because time obeys standards. And I want everyone to understand that. Everyone has the same amount of time in a day. Why do some people create so much in an hour than others take 2 weeks? I remember when I was first getting mentored by my mentor, I told him, I said, you earn more in an hour than I do a year. And he started laughing. And I said, I want you to teach me that. He said, it's all in work habits. Well, he taught me the standard of working. And I was no dummy. I was like, I'm going to model his work habits. And that's what I did. And then what happened? I went from being 150,000 in debt to earning my first million within 2 years. When I didn't have a job, how did I do that? I changed my standards. That's what I did. I changed the standard of thinking. I changed my standard of actions. I changed my standard of my environment. So once you understand how important standards are and you become your standard, like what is your standard of excellence? You need to define what that means so you can duplicate it every day over and over again.
You just brought up work habits, and I think this is such an interesting topic. We talk about goal achieving activities. We talk about doing things that are actually moving the needle. So working on things that are actually going to make a difference, get you closer to your goal, not just doing things to do things. You talked at the beginning of this episode about busy work. So what are some standards that really hold someone accountable to doing the things that matter the most?
Well, it's always standard of thinking for me first. We become what we think about. So if I'm thinking about winning, that's all my mind focuses on, then I start getting ideas. But if I'm focused on, I wonder if it's going to happen, or I'm afraid, what if it doesn't work? What is my family going to think? What are they going to think? So most people are not even taking shots that they should be taking because they're worried about what other people are thinking. So everything starts and ends with our thinking. 95% of success is mindset, 5% is strategy, yet everybody has it in reverse. They're always looking for a better strategy. Well, you could have the most amazing strategy with a faulty mindset. You're never going to implement that strategy. So we want to make a huge emphasis on our standard of thinking. I have to think in a certain way. What is that certain way? That certain way is it's already done. If it was already done, what would I look back on and say that I did? And that's what I want to operate with every day.
How can someone install a new standard today?
They have to decide, like, this is who I am. You draw a line in the sand, said, this is who I am. This is how I'm operating. And you literally, when you build a new standard today, you're recreating a new paradigm. And our paradigms are running our life. So I want you to look at what paradigm is currently operating my life that is outdated. And I want you to literally create a new paradigm and constantly write it out every day, the new operating system. And every time you do that, your mind is rewiring and it's creating a new picture on a subconscious level. But we've got to get over this time. I'm so busy. Like I always tell people, like, nobody cares how much time it takes me to do something. I don't care how much time it takes anyone to do something. The result is all that matters. And as you're building one standard after the next over a course of a year, you're going to do so much more in less time.
Yep. We have watched people set new standards and step boldly into them and hold them firm. And we've also watched people really want to set a new standard and waver almost immediately because of outside circumstances or other people in their lives or influence that they felt was too great for them to hold that standard, what would your advice be?
Well, number one, to set standards properly, you have to set them before the day starts, the night before. And when you're setting a new standard, when I set a new standard, when I said it's a line in the sand, I mean, I can't go under this line. That's the deal with standards. If I set a standard and I do it for 10 days, then on the 11th day, I drop. Well, it's not a standard yet. I haven't installed it on a subconscious level. That's why you want to identify what your standards are. But our standards are our DNA to success. And we've got to understand this. Everyone watching this, listening to this, has a standard. You might not like the standard, but you have a standard that is driving you. But our standards have to be, and I want everyone to lock in on this, it has to be greater than our emotions. It has to be greater than our feelings. Most people's feelings are creating their standards. They have it backwards. You have to have your standards creating your feelings. What does that mean? That means even when I don't want to do something, it's uncomfortable, I do it anyway. Well, the person who has it backwards, they're letting their feelings dictate their standards. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready. I don't have the skill set yet. Well, how do you create the skill set? By doing it before you're ready. Like I've never created a skill the first time I did something, oh, I've got that skill. No, you've got to put the 10,000 hours in. You've got to put the reps in. It's always an opportunity to get better. It's always an opportunity to create a new standard over and over and over again.
Arash, you talk about creating 3 wins a day, getting 1% better every day. Would you say that those tie into standard?
They become a standard. So how do standards get created? They get created with discipline. They get created with repetition. See, most adults do things one time and they're like, oh, I've done it. Mm. That's a losing attitude. The winning attitude is you do it until you can't get it wrong. But most people do something until they can get it right. And I can tell you, I have so many examples of this. I remember when I was first started our business and I had never sold one to many. And I remember I was like, this has got to be my standard. I have to get so good. I got to keep putting the reps in. I got to keep practicing. Well, I made it a standard. Now I'm just as comfortable talking to you right now, Mike, as I am talking to hundreds and hundreds of people. You know, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just as comfortable. Well, how did that happen? I had to make it a standard. And if you knew me growing up, the one thing that I would never be is a public speaker. Now I'm constantly doing that, you know, but my purpose was so much greater than my insecurities. So what is your purpose? See, most people's insecurities are so much greater than their purpose. They're doing things just to get by instead of to thrive. We want to get people thriving. You know, as we're recording this, it's like right in the beginning of 2026. And I'm like, how can everyone create the best year of their life? Like I sincerely believe every single person watching this, listening to this, is going to have the best year of their life. But the only way they could do it is by auditing what standards are outdated and what are the opposites of the outdated standards, the new standards they have to build.
You know, Raj, we started this episode talking about time management and talking about how it won't work, and this is kind of the solution. So it's almost posing time boxing versus standard boxing. When I think about time management or even activity management, it's very physical, right? You're trying to manage something that you feel like you can see. You can put it on a calendar. It's physical. Standard is very different. It's not as physical. How do you kind of compare those two ideas?
Well, you got to go to the unknown. The unknown's where the magic is. The known is where the comfort zone is. So if you're creating based on the known, you're going to maybe improve your results by 5% this year. You've got to be willing to go to the unknown. Every standard is an unknown. You don't know what the outcome's going to create, but you know it's going to be far better because there's this internal GPS inside of us is like, that's your new level. That's how you have to grow. That's why every time I fail, I always have the attitude, this is happening for me. I just got to go and persist a little longer. I've got to do more repetition. That's what persistence is. It's the repetition of doing a thing over and over until it turns into a belief. So I want everybody to think about this. What is the one standard that would move the needle that you are willing to enforce for the next 7 days? And why do I say 7 days instead of 90 days? Because you're going to create a mini quantum leap in your standards in 7 days. And then you do it for another 7 days. See, a lot of people are overcommitting. I'm going to do this for 12 weeks. I'm going to do this for 18 weeks. I'm going to do this for 2026. I want you to do it in mini sprints. 7 days is a mini sprint. And then you're going to create an identity shift by operating with that standard for 7 days. But I want your attitude not to be on time. We're the only people on this planet that understand time, human beings.
Yep.
So the more we go into the unknown, the faster things are going to come.
All right, Arash, I'm going to tell on myself here in an attempt to relate to everybody. So I've never told you this. I don't even think I've told Chris this. Something that I used to love to do, this is maybe like a year ago even, is I would write things down that I was doing for the satisfaction of like checking them off. Like I love checking off my to-do list of things that I did. Well, about a year ago, I forced myself to only let myself write things down that were actually like goal achieving activities. Like if it didn't help me get closer to the goal, I wasn't allowed to write it down because I just wanted to check it off and it was going to get done anyways. And this has actually made a huge difference in doing things that move the needle, not just doing things that needed to be done.
Yeah, I mean, it's just old programming.
Yeah.
Why did you do it?
Not that some of it wasn't even important. Like some of it does need to be done, but it wasn't urgent. It wasn't like business result producing activities.
Yeah, but it's old programming.
Yeah.
Why do we do it? Because we're busy. We love being busy.
We love feeling productive, but it's not even productive if it's not moving you anywhere.
See, most people are distracted. So that was a distractive habit for you to allow you to avoid the hard stuff.
Yeah.
When we're working on the hard stuff, that's where the magic is, but we've got to do hard better. So how do we eliminate distraction? We commit. That's how you eliminate distraction. You commit. You say, this is what I'm doing. Going back to your earlier question, because I don't even think I answered it, is 3 wins is not hard. That's not a big number. I'm going to create 3 wins from my goal every day. But I love working with numbers. All you have to do, I'm talking about doing it 5 days a week. I'm not even talking about 7 days. That's 15 wins a week. Then you times that by 90 days, you're going to have 194 and a half wins. What do you think is going to be created? A massive shift in your results, a massive shift in your confidence, a massive shift in your standards. And you're going to start understanding, and I say you to everybody else, that you're going to start understanding your results are just a default of what you're doing every day. And that's why, to me, like, out of this whole philosophy, I didn't even know what standards were, but I was creating them unconsciously. Then when I started deconstructing what I was doing, because I wanted to teach it to millions of people, I started deconstructing at every level the standards that I built. And that's why I always say standards are more important than goals. Goals are something we aspire to be. Standards are who we are. And whenever I work with somebody, I ask questions because I'm identifying where their 2 things. I identify where their program currently is and where their standard is. I already know, because then all I have to do is fill in that gap for them and make them aware of how to install the new standard, and they're going to get a new result. Let's look at this another way. A lot of people come to us because they want to earn more money. Well, money is a standard. And what you're earning right now is your standard around money. Now, if you don't like it, okay, fine, change it. Like if you're struggling right now, decide you're not going to struggle anymore. Decide, I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to start building my habits. I'm going to start building my thinking. I'm going to start building my environment. And in 6 months, you're going to be a different person.
I want to make a challenge here too, because on last week's episode, we talked about challenging yourself, right? And so whenever you're creating 3 wins a day, like create big wins. Like, what are you qualifying as a win? And are you going a little bit too easy on yourself? I don't think you should put it out of reach where you can't create the 3 wins a day, but I think that you should go big.
We have to be ultra competitive with ourselves. I don't think people are competing against themselves. And I hate seeing it. It hurts my heart. They're conforming instead of competing with themselves. I'm not asking you to compete with anybody else. I never compete with anybody else. But we have to start looking and being ultra competitive with ourselves. And when we do that, we stop negotiating with ourselves and we're training our mind to who we're becoming. And then the beautiful part is once we train it, it becomes normal like breathing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to try to breathe. Breathing is just what we do. And that's where we've got to change. When you're saying do harder, like it is a gift. And then going back to your wins, like some of my greatest wins that I write down are when I've lost.
Yeah.
Because I was willing to go after it. And that is going to create future wins. We're always creating invisible results. So this is why it's so paramount that we're not attached to the outcome and let the outcome define us. Because I may lose 10 times in a row. That 11th time I created the biggest win. And that biggest win is going to be so much greater than those 10 losses.
Yes.
But the question I have for everybody is, are you willing to lose this year? Are you willing to lose? Because that's what it's going to take to win. Losing and winning are the same. But most people only think about winning. But think about everyone's life. What do you remember most? I always remember the losses because the lessons are from the losses, not the wins. The wins come with the persistence of going forward even when you lose.
Yes, absolutely. And on that same note, I think so often we're just too easy on ourselves. We give ourselves way too much comfort and way too much slack and really appease ourselves too much. And what you're saying is push yourself, compete with yourself, get yourself out of your comfort zone and don't go so easy on yourself. You don't need to be comfortable all day long.
Yeah, it's so funny. This is totally a different realm I'm going.
Yeah.
But I get a lot of people ask me about parenting advice. And they are hard on their kids. When they ask me the advice, and I always ask them this question, do you hold yourself to the same standards you hold your kids? And they freeze, and I say, well, you might want to observe that whenever you ask that question. But the reason I bring that up is like, what standards are you allowing to be just good enough?
Yeah.
You're not here to be just good enough. You're not here to be good. You're here to be great. You have infinite potential. And we've got to tap into our greatness. We tap into our greatness not in comfort, but in willing to fail. That's why I say you have to be willing to fail in order to win.
All right, Arash, any final thoughts or key ideas that someone should take away from this episode?
I hope everyone gets emotionally involved and gets super serious about building their standards because standards always win. Standards change my life significantly. Standards change my clients' lives significantly. I have a client who's a great client of ours, Joe. And before he started working really deeply with us, he was just listening to this podcast. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he said, what my life has changed just because of standards has been remarkable. And then he started working deep with us. And now, he's in a different stratosphere. But I will tell you, standards always wins. And I can't say that enough. But I want everyone to do my test, 7 days. And then another 7 days. Make them into 7-day sprints. And you're going to make it so much more simple for your life.
All right. I can't wait to hear what you create with this concept of standard boxing. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and leave us a rating and review. Share this with your friends and family or on social media. And make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll see you next week with another episode of the 7-Figure Standard Podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mikey and how Voss Coach & Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit vosscoachandco.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.